So first off, I just wanted to start this video by saying I'm sorry that we never posted again.
Bye! I came here to party, I'm not gonna lie. So call up somebody, cause I ain't got the time. Nah, I'm feeling myself in the best way. I'm gonna pretend it's my birthday. Got all of my friends going crazy, cause this is how we do. We'll go dancing in the club on a Saturday night. Go driving down Sunset, feeling alright, yeah. Doing anything we like. We'll go cruising down the beach till the morning light. So wild and free, feeling so alive, yeah. Doing anything we like. We on that golden state of mind. We on that golden state of mind. We on that West Coast high. And we feeling that, feeling it, feel that vibe. We on that. Yeah, we do it better. We don't ever care.
It's literally been 2 years since we posted our last video, and a lot has happened. We both went all the way through terms 1 through 5, and we were able to take step 1 and pass it. And so now that I'm starting clinical rotations, I'll definitely have a little bit more time and I'll be able to post more videos of things that you guys might want to see. I was also planning on posting a video of my step 1 dedicated schedule, but I unfortunately didn't get to do that. But I will talk a little bit about how I studied for step 1 in this video. And if you guys have any questions or anything in specific that you want to see on this channel, just please comment it down below. But basically, for step 1, I probably took 2.5 months, maybe 3 months. I took like 3 months for dedicated. I started studying in January and I took step in at the end of March. So it was basically 3 months, give or take. And it took me probably like a week to figure out my schedule, but basically I started off using a lot of different resources that we as medical students have access to, but then I realized that less was more with me, and I also realized that the way that I was going to best learn what I needed to know for STEP was through doing questions. Now, there are some people that like to content review, and I will say that sometimes that's necessary, but I found that with my own studies, the thing that benefited me the most and that helped me do well on STEP was just doing the most amount of questions possible. And I honestly also, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I didn't really use first aid like that. Like, I never read through first aid once. I just kind of referenced first aid, throughout med school whenever I needed it on the island. And then for STEP, I kind of only referenced it when I couldn't understand something in a question bank and I wanted more information. I would go to the book and see what it said. But for the most part, I also don't think that first aid is super, super detailed. It is a good resource, but it definitely sometimes lacks information that you need. So, but basically, I used UWorld. So a week of my dedicated study looked like on Mondays, I would take the NBME practice exams. And on Tuesdays, I would finish the review of that exam. So on Mondays, I would take the exam, take a break, start reviewing the exam, and then I would usually finish it on Tuesday. And then Wednesday through Saturday, I would do 2 to 3 blocks of UWorld, and I would review those 2 to 3 blocks. And then Sundays, I started to take off because I realized that I learned more and started to do better when I gave myself a day of rest. And then on Mondays, another practice exam, Tuesday review, Wednesday through Thursday, U World questions. And I basically did that over and over until I finished the U World Q Bank. When I was doing the U World Q Bank, I mostly did it on tutor mode because I found that whenever I did the questions on exam mode, I would get tired I would fatigue faster when trying to review my incorrect answers. And sometimes I wouldn't get through all of it, or I would speed through it because I was so tired. Whereas when I would do the questions on tutor mode, you answer a question and you get the feedback immediately. So I was more likely to take the time to read the explanation. I was more likely to do that if it was on tutor mode versus exam mode. And I really only started doing exam mode once the exam started approaching. So I would say like a month out from my step, or maybe more like 2 weeks out from step, I started doing exam mode. Actually, it was a month out from step exam mode. And then 2 weeks out, I started practicing endurance, and I would do 7 blocks of U World back to back because the exam is 8 hours long. So there is that endurance component. But the way I would review my U World questions is I would read every single explanation, because you can learn from your incorrect answers, but you can also learn from the correct answers, especially if you got it right and you were stuck between two. It's good to read why the answer was the one that you chose and not the other one. And there are really, really good details that we need on U World that you read through that will be beneficial for you when you sit for step. What else? Oh, and then my incorrects on U World, I would make flashcards on the U World website, and I would just review those flashcards. I used Anki all throughout medical school, but I always wrote my own Anki cards. So the idea of using a pre-made deck wasn't really something that I wanted to do because I hadn't done it before. So why start during dedicated? So I just continued making my own cards, and I would go over all of those cards. And that really helped drill in the incorrects and drill in those necessary concepts. I feel like there's for sure something that I forgot to say, and there are more questions that could be answered about step 1 dedicated. But the 2 things that I will leave you with, as I feel like the biggest tips and things that you absolutely have to do. The other one is like optional, but I found it to be very beneficial for me. So the first one that you absolutely have to do and should do, in my opinion, is every time you sit for an NBME exam or a practice exam during your dedicated, it should simulate the exact exam, step 1 exam time frame. It needs to be timed, because a lot of times you might have the option of taking the practice exam offline, where basically you don't time yourself and you're just going through a PDF with questions and you're just answering the questions. You're not really looking at the time, and then you score yourself and you see how you did. I don't really recommend that, because the time frame element is super, super important and beneficial. And sometimes you may answer a question right and get to the right answer because you had more time to do so. So you want to make sure that every single time you sit for a practice exam, you're simulating the actual test day exam time frame, because that's all you're going to get. You don't want to train yourself, because every practice exam is just practice, and you're trying to train yourself to prepare yourself for exam day. You don't want to train yourself and then miss the time frame component, I think. Because I will say personally, when I was doing the U World questions on tutor mode, sometimes I would take more time than I should have answering a question, but I really did use U World as a learning tool. And that is absolutely what everyone told me before I started studying for step 1. And it's absolutely true. You don't use U World as a measure of the score that you're going to get, but you use U World as a learning tool. So that's why I took my time on tutor mode, and I really only started timing myself on the UWorld questions once I was like a month out from the exam. So there's that. Every time you sit for a practice exam, take it online and make sure that you're timing yourself. I think the exam is like 40 questions each block, and you get like 50 minutes per block, 55 minutes, maybe an hour and 10 minutes. I don't remember the exact time frame, so don't quote me, but just make sure that during dedicated, when you're sitting for those exams, you are making sure that the exam is timed, because a lot of people actually don't do that when they're doing the practice exams, and I think that could be detrimental. Second thing isn't a must, but it's something that I did and I really feel like I benefited from it. Was so there's this exam or practice exam that you're supposed to take when you're a week out from your actual step 1 exam date, a week to like maybe 4 days before. It's called the free 120 exam, and it's basically 120 free sample questions by the writers of the NBME. The writers of the NBME exams are the same writers of the step 1 exam. So it's really, really important to go through those 120 free sample questions. And sometimes people get repeats on the actual exam from this practice exam. I don't necessarily think I did. Maybe I got like a repeat concept, but the concepts on the free 120 are extremely beneficial to key into like days before the exam. So I took this exam at the actual Prometric testing center where I signed up to take my step 1 exam. So a week before my step exam, I actually went into the Prometric center at like 8 o'clock in the morning. I sat for this test, and I kind of like simulated everything about the test day, the environment, the time frame, everything. And I really liked it because I was able to familiarize myself with like the computer that I would have on the day that I took step, familiarize myself with how the breaks worked, how the checking in and out of the room for breaks worked. And I really liked it because it meant that when I went in to sit for my step 1 exam on the actual day, I didn't have to worry about, the nitty-gritty little detailed things that had nothing to do with the questions or the exam. I could just really focus all of my energy on just doing well on the exam and reading the questions and taking my time. So I highly recommend it, especially if you're someone that has test-taking anxiety. I did it more so because I wanted to familiarize myself with the environment before putting myself in that environment for 8 hours. So yeah, those are the 2 tips that I would leave. But yeah, for the most part, that's all I did for dedicated. And it is a very grueling studying process, especially because sometimes it can be isolating, and when you're in it, it seems like it's never going to end, but it's okay. These are the sacrifices we make to become future physicians. This is what we signed up for. But yeah, if you guys have any more specific questions about dedicated though, you can always comment down below, whatever questions you may have.